think we're good. Let's assume so. Yeah, so no. Always helps to put on the right pair of headphones, right? All right. Hello again. This is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. Yeah, I think we can skip the amusing story because it just fell out of my head. So we'll just take that as it comes. Um, I really want to talk to you today about the Raymond uh, Hearing and sort of stylistically and um, let's say strategically, I think where they're at. And I need to preface all of my comments here by saying I don't know what precisely their strategic thinking was. I was certainly not sitting on any of their meetings on this, but I do know everybody involved very well. And this, I think, is a lot more. I mean, it's a very interesting compare and contrast opportunity here. So I want to highlight all of that because I know a lot of people come here to this channel for the cross examination, and then they stay here for the long winded stories. And awesome. I love the cross examination. I love sharing that with you all. Um, and I do love coming in like a ton of bricks. You have to understand that many times I don't come in like a ton of bricks. And um, I think it's no coincidence that those are the same ones that I don't necessarily show you um, because we're not, there's good reason not to do that. Yeah, this is, you are, as I've said many times, getting a very skewed look at my practice here, but that's okay. Everybody, it's the, we all watch the videos that say destroyed so and so, right? And not so much use careful argumentation and persuasion to win the day. So, but I want to back up here, and I just want to say, it's very plain that the style of the attorney for Mr. Peterson on this hearing is very different than mine. And I want you to understand. I don't know if he could come in hard. I don't know if he's not, if this is just who he is. I don't know what his ultimate game plan is. And I'm not trying to put I'm not trying to criticize that. And I want to be very clear. This is not a negative thing. We're just trying to explain why somebody would want to be doing this here. It may be kind of clear from the video, but because they're on the bottom floor, but there's like 500 people there. There was probably 6 or 7 sheriff's deputies. There were reporters. There was a whole gaggle of attorneys, attorney assistants, school board members, teachers, just watching people from other districts. It was a whole thing. And while the air in there was extremely tense, and it's like this: you sit down in a bleachers. I think risers is what they call them. It's like this, and you're made for elementary students, and you're sitting right next to somebody who you don't know except by their fashion choices, and that's not a great indicator if they're with you or against you, which means you don't know if you can speak freely or not. That's a tense situation. But it's local politics. So, but in this room, there you have to, and I who knows? We don't have any great polling here, but there is a majority, I would say, of people supporting the principle outright, straight up, no question about it. They are to, spent their evening, came there in that tense environment to support that principle. At the same time, there is an extremely strong, tight, well organized cohort of, I guess, citizens. It's hard to describe them, but certainly citizens of the United States who people with able to give democratic input. It's not clear whether or not they're voters there or whatever. That's the only distinction I'm trying to make. But those people are well organized. Same thing on the other end, by the way. Both are well organized, but they are deeply committed to supporting the agenda of getting the principle out there. And I'm going to say an anti-gay agenda. And I want to say that I am well aware that many, if not all, of these people on the, let's say, the school board supporting people, as opposed to the principal supporting people here, they deeply believe that the principal was engaged in misconduct. Okay, I had seen all of the documents, I believe, up until the beginning of the school year, and certainly up to the charges and everything else. So I know there was more stuff that came out, more documents that were exchanged after I had seen everything. But let's say all of the public documents that I read at that time, again, back in I just didn't see any evidence that they could say that he had done X, Y, and Z thing wrong. Not that they could have, that they actually pointed to something that said that he didn't do that right. And, I've seen comments, I've seen all sorts of things that said he was a bad communicator and, trying to think of other examples here. The point is my understanding is that they were all fairly vague enough that I have not seen anybody say something along the lines of on X, Y, and Z date, or even in general, he frequently or on more than one occasion, so during some time period while he was the principal, he told a teacher X, which was against the rules, or he failed to do Y, or something along those lines, okay? And I think I have seen, and I guess I want to sort of clarify, I have seen some statement along the lines of he failed to document things. And while I think that's a start, it's the things part. And again, if I'm not clear on this, please comment and let me know. What things that he was exactly alleged to have not documented, I'm not clear on. Okay, so, but I do know that there was an extensive period of, let's say, back and forth and record and document keeping leading up to the non-renewal. So I think that there is a pretty good, if it's not in there, where I don't know where else I would expect it to be. So I'm going to pause here just for 1 second. If you'll, hello again. Thank you. This, like, the way these lights come and the dust, even just a little bit of dust on these glasses, it can be insufferable. So thank you there for your patience. And I guess, again, I'm going to try to headline this here. My presence up until the point where I was no longer representing the principal was unquestionably ratcheting up the pressure in a situation that was extremely high pressure. And you have to understand that the school district brought in the attorney, Shayna Lewis, who was running the school board's thing, and we'll get into that in a second. I happened to be the attorney for someone who was suing Shayna Lewis for her representation of a school superintendent in Kenosha. And that is pending in federal court. Could be I could lose and be a total moron, or we could win and she could have a big problem. We don't know at this point. But I think the allegations there, especially at that time, were extremely serious, and there was a lot of overlapping events. I think that all of those things are fair to say. So Um, Needless to say, there was a good deal of tension between Miss Lewis and myself, because just imagine this situation here. I am representing someone who's suing her. She has an attorney that I'm going back and forth with, but we're making allegations against her. I'm deposing Miss Lewis, and at the same time, they bring her in, and there's an extreme tension between these activists. There's law enforcement who are involved in all of this. Um, and there is accusations of threats on both sides. Again, people go to law enforcement. There is a lot going on here that beyond my pre-existing, work on that. So while that's going on here, while I'm deposing Miss Lewis, I'm also then in a position to be talking to her about the Raymond stuff, because she's the direct attorney for that case that the school board association brought her in, recommended her, is my understanding, and so she brought them in. At the same time, Miss Lewis brought in attorney Lori Lubinsky to prosecute the case, which is, everything about that is extremely strange. And maybe we can get into more detail about that at some time. But and at that time, Miss Lubinsky is representing the school district and the superintendent, for which Miss Lewis is also being sued for assisting in what was alleged to be a violation of free speech and other constitutional rights of my client. Okay, so then she's prosecuting that case. I firmly believe that she was brought in specifically because they knew that I was there, which Lori Lubinsky and I have an excellent working relationship. I think it's fair to say. If she wants to correct me on that, I will be happy to stand corrected. And I think it's like this. She and I both understand that there are the rules, and that both of us agree that we're going to follow the rules to the T, but that anything outside of the rules in an adversarial process is more or less fair game. I think that describes, and that we're both professionals. I think that fairly describes our relationship, which with me, I mean, if that's where you're at, I'm more than happy to play along those lines. That's perfectly fine with me. Yes, no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm happy. There's all sorts of things. Let's just say that I think that they have had a hard time pinning down exactly what my, you know, who I am, because again, I can present to them differently in different cases depending on what exactly it is in the best interest of my clients, what my clients want. So that I can, and I think that they felt that Lori's had some success in that, and I don't dispute that. I'm happy to work professionally with everybody. I think a big distinction, something that I don't see Lori doing, is being dishonest or going back on her word. I do see her doing things and making attacks from different angles, and I don't see that anything. There's nothing in the rules against sideways attacks for sure. I do see, sometimes things will come in conjunction with her, and nothing's unrelated and nothing happens for no reason. And I get all that. I'm just saying, as opposed to people who say one thing and do another, that is, I think, that's the distinction I'm trying to draw there, which is, professionalism in a nutshell, in my opinion. Because it's all about a working relationship and tomorrow. And I think that Lori believes that more than anybody. So that's my Lori Lubinsky gossip there. Shayna gossip, Lori gossip, um, there. So that I think I was only serving to ratchet things up. And by the way, you couldn't say that I was actively ratcheting anything up. I think it was more to say that just even my presence was doing that. Um, but I mean, who knows? Because what I'm trying to say is there is so much there that was going on in terms of local politics that I just don't, it's even to this day, have any idea of what was going on and what the motivating factors were and who was doing what and who was doing, what else. More or less of what I'm describing to you is what I understand of it now. There are a great deal of records on this on, I think, Facebook and elsewhere. And certainly this made local radio and other platforms and, hey, but it's school politics, brings out everybody. But yeah, and I'm sorry, and just to unbury the lead here one more time, the accusation very much is that the school board is trying to remove this principal because they believe this principal is gay, and that there are statements on the record from a majority of the school board members that indicate their belief that all gay people are dangerous around children in one form or another. Okay, and that just that he must, because he's gay, should not be allowed to be around children. Which I kind of thought that concept had gone out in like the late '90s, at least of like official polite society, but I was clearly mistaken. Um, and when I say that, I mean around here. But still, wow. So that was something still, even when I say that out loud, I think sometimes it's just kind of hard for my mind to wrap around that. It's not that people even hold as beliefs, more or less, to that as a political figure that you are stating all of those things. Sorry, as a political figure who faces re-election, that you are publicly stating those ideas. That to me is what is shocking. Everything else about it is, uh, I've seen it come and I've seen it go, but that, yeah. The other thing, again, we'll remember is that Raymond is becoming increasingly urban, and which is changing the demographics, you know, tremendously. And I think that that's also part of what explains sort of this old guard and the new moms, for lack of a better word. Okay, so finally here, we're getting to the thrust of all this. You could see that in a situation like this, especially where there's one other critical piece of fact. Let's remember that you're entitled to due process, okay, and you're also entitled to hearing by the school board, okay. Now, let's say the school board is entirely packed with your political opponents, for example, and that even you bring everybody in the whole town, and everybody's town says, we're going to recall you if you vote for this, and they do it anyway, you're still fired. Okay? The check on them is that they then lose their job. You have to keep all that in mind, that there is, legally speaking, there is nothing, and man, we should read Hortonville. I would love that case. Legally speaking, there is nothing preventing the school board, to put it another way, this is very much like an impeachment, okay? And, international audiences may have few examples of this, but when a high government official is to be removed either at the state level or at the federal level, the process is more or less called impeachment. And what happens is there is a trial of sorts but the jury, instead of being somebody who is impartial, happens to be the body itself, okay, which is usual actually for a lot of reasons, especially when the body is a legislative body. So we've seen that in several cases where, for example, I think in most recent memory, Trump was impeached, but the outcome was a foregone conclusion because his party held all the seats in the Senate or the majority or whatever, right? Okay. So this is a very similar process and so why did they do that? Because they felt that it was important enough to have the trial itself and to go from there. Which, you can see the parallel between this situation. Why, if you're going to lose, why go have it in public and air your dirty laundry? Well, A, you might not lose because there's going to be pressure on them, assuming that there is. And B, there's going to be, they may be held democratically accountable. So that is, I would say, the big questions here that we have to, why go through this whole process? What is the point of it if it is a sham? Okay, and I think that is fair. I mean, when we are looking at the conduct of Shana Lewis herself, it's easy to come to the conclusion that she's entirely biased in favor of the administrator who she's working with and hired Lori Lubinsky with, in conjunction with. I don't think there's any, it would be unfair to come away with that conclusion at all. So, but, hey, that doesn't mean it's illegal. You have to keep that in mind, okay? There's certain checks and balances. Due process is a very flexible concept, and the process that's due here is what we're seeing. Okay, so in a situation like this where I'm going to keep using the word rigged, and I don't want that to sound like it's a negative connotation, like there being I don't even say deceitful or something else, because again, it's totally within their legal rights to do that. And I just want to be fair to them, even though they're public figures and everything else. I want to be fair to everybody and say, it's rigged here. And the same way that the employment relationship between Shana Lewis, who's representing the board, and the superintendent, their relationship would ordinarily be, I think, disqualifying. But it's not, okay? So, there's a couple different ways to come at that. One way may be that it's completely rigged and that to make a mockery of the whole system. Another way might be to draw everything out. Another way may be to work within their guidelines to a certain extent. Or another way may be to be extremely polite to them, and which, by the way, I think only emphasizes and underscores how unreasonable they're being. Because, let's think about this for a second here. We always, when we're communicating, have to ask the question, who is our audience? Simple. Okay? Who is our audience? Here, if everything we've talked about is true, the audience is literally the audience. Frequently the peanut gallery, as we say, is just there, and the audience is the judge or the jury or something along those lines. But here, assuming that the school board, that you don't have the votes on the school board, you're having a public hearing anyway, who's the audience? It's the public. It's the reporters. It's the people who came. Okay, now, keep in mind again, you've got a large group. Some of them, assume it's the majority, we don't know how large, is supporting the principal. We've got another sizable group, again, we don't know how large, could even be a majority, is committed to being against the principal. Okay? At some point in the future, you are thinking about recalling these school board members and then flipping the school board. I think this is a fair way to describe the long game there. Okay? Great. I mean, that's called the democratic process in action. No problem about it. But here's how the recall process works, just so you understand, in Wisconsin. If you think a government official, an elected government official, has betrayed their trust or done something else that's unconscionable, you can try to have them recalled. You can, even if you think they did something totally minor, you can have them recalled, but there's got to be some conditions in terms of they have to have been there for at least 6 months, a year, or something like that, I remember. And you got to go out and get a certain number of signatures, which is something along the lines of 5-10% or something of the total number of people who voted, okay? Which you can see on a village election, that's not going to be that bad, but in a statewide election, that could be a big pain in the butt. And really, the only way to do that is to go door to door and get people to sign these things. I mean, there's just no other way to get that required number of signatures. And you've got to do a bunch of other things, and then you go and present the signatures. They can challenge the signatures. It's a whole thing. But whatever, you get past the required threshold, then there is going to be a recall election. That person is then recalled, okay? And then there is a new election, and basically anybody, and this is how they do it in Wisconsin, anybody can run for that seat. You're really going to want to have just one other person, and then it becomes a brand new election. And if that person wins, they win their seat back. And if somebody else wins, then they've taken over. Okay? That is how that process works. Okay. So again, it's fair to say that a good portion of the active interested voters in that election are going to be in that room. Okay. So the question to you is, do you come in there? What's your strategy? Do you come in hot? Do you come in cold? Do you come in mild and warm? How do you interact with this audience here? And I think another part of the calculation goes something like this, okay? If we're going to use Ben style, if you come in with Ben kind of level of cross-examination, and again, I don't mean to put that, if you come in hot, that's a better way to say it. If you come in hot, who are you going to win over? Okay, one set. Who are you going to lose? Real good question. Is this side bigger than this side? Okay, maybe. Then, do you go ahead? No. You still wait. Now let's say you go in cold or cool or mild or some other version, some other color tone, okay? Then you have to ask yourself, how many do I get? How many do I lose for each of those? And is there a way to maximize this differential here? Because, if you gain 10 people on this side and you lose nobody, you're in a way better situation than if you gain 55 people on this side, but you lose 50 on this side, right? So that, I assume, is a large part of what the calculation would be. Not just for the client, but for the attorney and for everybody else involved in terms of that strategy. You also going to know that basically what they're going to say. Okay, and now here, what's their line? Their line is that Jeff is a bad worker, and he's such a bad worker that he doesn't even realize what the criticism is that he's taking. So in this world, we just don't keep people around like that. Okay, so how are we going to come back? If you come back now look, everybody knows, in the room knows that there's the culture war stuff going on. Okay, do you bring the culture war stuff out? Do you emphasize it in another way? And how do they do that? I think with those emails is the main way that they touch on that. How do you do that? Okay, again, you have to keep in mind how many people are you going to gain, how many people are you going to lose? Because it's at the end of the day, the key question isn't how many votes do you have on the school board, it's how many voters do you have in a recall election. So that's a weird way to come at an employment matter, but that is ultimately the way to get what he wants, is to flip that board. Because he lives there. And he's invested in that school district. Most employees would not be so personally invested in that school district. But that's also small town politics. Everybody's got a big stake. So, I hope we have gotten to the point where we understand at least that you could come to a conclusion where saying, even though it's a completely rigged hearing, that you're asking permission to do things where other people might just do them. Perfectly, it makes absolutely perfect sense. And again, I want to emphasize that the other people who may just do them may also be super sweet and nice another time. It's all about the strategy. So that's why that's sort of why we're explaining how do you get to the strategy? You got to think about who your audience is. All right. Now, hopefully, I can find this button, just like a young man, and we can go from there. If you made it this far, I certainly appreciate it. I really did enjoy watching the hearing. I stayed up until I think about 9:30. I think they went till like 11:30. I live streamed it from home after that. This is what I want to say on more than anything else. I did not get the sense from watching that school board members that their number one priority was the pupils. And I think that if there's anything that this footage shows, it's that. And that's why you better stick with us. We'll keep you informed.